SAGA Podcast.
And welcome back to the Space Arena Ground Arena Saga Podcast, where we cover Star Wars Unlimited from the ground up into space. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I'm joined by Banana Crapshoot.
What's up, everybody? Happy to be here. Talk some Star Wars Unlimited.
And Kennedy Hawk.
Hey,
sorry, man, stepped on you there. All right, so we find ourselves getting towards the end of Set 1. So today we wanted to dive into talking about some of the things that we can take, some of the lessons we can take from Set 1 into Set 2, and sort of through the prism, through the framework of meta-analysis. Kennedy, you want to start us off here with today's meta-discussion?
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about some sort of stable meta decks. Is that what we're going for in this first topic? Right? Okay, yeah, so we've kind of reached the end of the meta. And I've played a lot of different card games recently. One Piece, Lorcana, all sorts of things that started from the ground up. Digimon. So I've played through a ton of one-set metas. And at the end of those metas, we always kind of have these settled deck types. And maybe not a 50-card deck list is set to be static, but there are staple cards in all certain types of decks of a certain leader, for example, in Star Wars Unlimited. And going into a Set 2, it's really important to know what those stable decks are and how to build on those archetypes to win some of your early Set 2 matches. So we thought we'd go through some of the staple decks for Set 2. So I think for me, one of the staple deck types I've seen is sort of a blue, some sort of deck with blue in it, with vigilance in it, that's like a really heavy control, villainy event deck. So these decks are super controlling. They want to extend the game as long as possible and play big, strong bombs at the end. So going against these decks, a lot of times they have sort of a weakness against early aggro, and then once they get into the mid-range, they can kind of control things with just super efficient events. We've seen this with Vader Leader, who is aggression mixed with vigilance. We've seen it with Iden mixed with, both command and vigilance. And we've seen it recently with Boba, or I've been doing Krennic with vigilance. And a lot of these key around a couple key cards. So you're always going to see things like Takedown that take care of the aggro leaders with 5 or less health. You're always going to see Vanquish. Typically these decks run vigilance in them themselves to help mill in mirror matches or to remove and heal and extend the game as long as possible. But have you guys all seen sort of a stable event control deck in your metas?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Either that, Iden. It's a lot of like Iden and Krennic and Palpatine. Like those are the three that I've seen and played against.
Yeah, basically anything that can control and lock down your opponent's board to the point that they get to their super laser blasts and their Avengers and their big sticks. Can be a really difficult and maybe unfun deck to play against, but a pretty fun deck to play. That's the deck that I've preferred the most in this first set. I've really liked some of the other mid-rangey decks that I've played, but in our area we've stabilized around to 2 or 3 of these super hyper-controlling decks. We're not controlling with units, we're not controlling by battling in the arenas, we're controlling by just deleting things off the board. And that deck will probably still exist in Set 2. So as we go into Set 2, it's important to remember there are going to be new leaders that add into that archetype. There's probably going to be new cards to mix in. But that's kind of a stable deck here at the end of Set 1. So what I like to do when I go into a Set 2, when I did this for Lorcana and for One Piece, the first week I showed up, everybody opened their new box and started experimenting. I actually just brought the same deck, the stable deck that I had at the end of Set 1. And it performs really well, because you know your deck in and out. You know what cards to look for. You know what cards are available in your toolset. And I slowly mixed in 1 or 2 cards at a time to not make giant changes into the deck. I'm not going to invent some new awesome archetype, but I'm going to have a really stable deck that I know is quality. And since I know what the new card pool is, I can kind of pick what tools do I need to deal with that new card pool. So that's what I like to do with sort of my stable decks at the end of a set. So, who wants to talk about another stable deck in their area?
I definitely think the opposite angle of this is appropriate to think about as well. So while you can come into the set 2 meta playing something that's been tried and true, where you've got all the staples figured out for, say, the blue control with the power of the dark side, the takedown, vanquish, on up through super laser blast, it's also important to know what's stable in your meta that other people are going to play. So while I tend to be playing blue and yellow cards, I tend to be playing against red cards a lot of the time. And I think knowing what to expect out of the Sabine that's across the table from you is just as important as familiarity with your own cards. So for instance, if I'm sitting down against Sabine, I need to have a turn 2 answer for either, depending upon which flavor, it could be Battlefield Marine in the ground arena, or it could be a Green Squadron A-Wing in the space arena, or if we're talking about the yellow Sabine, the cunning Sabine that's been flying around, I mean, it could be like a crafty smuggler or something. But the point is, based on what you expect this other player to do, you need to be not caught off guard by for a cause I believe in once you get into the deep game against Sabine. You need to have a clean answer for that K2SO so he's just not putting 10 damage onto you in a turn with a heroic sacrifice or whatever it is. It's almost as important. It's probably more important to know your deck and know your lines, but it's almost as important to know what to know what the staple cards are that your opponent's going to bring to the table. So whether it's a cunning Sabine or a command Sabine, you need to be ready for the K2SO, you need to be ready for the Sabine unit, you need to be ready for the flip turn. Of course, every leader you need to be ready for the flip turn. Vanna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes just with playing the game, right? Knowing, like, it's very important to know your own deck. If you don't know your own deck, what are you doing? But knowing what to expect, like you're going into turn 3 against whatever deck, you need to know what cards are they most likely to play this turn, right? And you get that from playtesting. If I never playtest against Iden, or I never playtest against Krennic, I don't know that he's probably, since he deploys on 5, he's probably going to ECL a steadfast battalion into my leader and take it out, right? That is what a lot of Krennic ECL decks are looking to do. Since he deploys kind of early, they love that steadfast battalion ECL play because it can take out Boba in one shot. So that a lot of that comes from playing the game and playtesting and learning what these decks like to do, how these decks work. And sometimes, even though you're an aggro player or you're a control player, play the other archetype. Learn how to play these other decks and learn how these other decks work. So when you're playing against them, that helps you know what to do against them and know what their most likely lines are, what their plays are, what they're trying to set up. Like if on 4 resource turn, Han bounces the Falcon back to hand, that means he probably has a 7-drop in his hand and he's looking to go from 5 to 7 next turn. If he pays to keep the Falcon out, he probably doesn't have the 5 to 7 going on. So just little things to know from playing against the other people. But a real stable deck archetype in our area is the Sabine aggro. The Sabine aggro is everywhere. Green and yellow, they are everywhere. Like you said, the K in the green, you're looking at the K2SO. I've even seen Dodonna ECL'd out a few times, which has been pretty sneaky. But yeah, you're always going to see the A-Wing, the wing leaders, space for Sabine. And then you're always going to see like your K2SO. There's Sabine, your 2-drop Sabine. Fighters for Freedom, 4 Cause I Believe in. Those are things you got to know. They're coming. Once you're playing Sabine, once you yourself have taken over 20 damage on your base, you're probably going to get hit for 6 to 8 the next turn. You got to close or you're probably going to lose. Unless you're running some crazy healing cards. And the yellow Sabine is a little faster, can play some better space units with the Falcon, and then has a little more reach with Surprise Strike. So it's not just for a cause I believe in and the heroic sacrifice you look out for, but the Surprise Strike is coming. So there's tons of Sabine players in PA. So
And these are
all over.
Yeah, all over. It's true. These are the weeks where it's most important to figure out. Some people call those the matchups, right? What do I use in my deck against a certain expected result from an opponent's deck based on their leader and base combination? So practicing those matchups through the entire first set, this is where all that payoff happens. So if your meta is super Sabine heavy, then you should know really well how to play into Sabines by this point. You might even know what cards to tech into your deck to like really slow those Sabines down. So this is the time to sort of like take advantage of all those repetitions you've gotten in, and hopefully you've played against the right decks well enough to know sort of what their lines of play are.
I definitely think Banana makes a good point in that whatever your bias is as a player, I am sort of publicly on record as being a toxic control player, but I've still spent a lot of time with mid-range decks in Luke Skywalker. Well, I guess Han has some rampy stuff. He's a little more bursty than mid-range, but as well as the aggro archetype. And part of my process in trying to really understand the meta and understand the lay of the land is knowing what my opponents are going to throw at me. Knowing my enemies' moves and the tools that I have in my deck to deal with those things. Knowing when you can safely claim early because they've already spent their resources, or when you have to try to stay in the turn because you don't want to get blown out by a Elite Lieutenant sneak attack, 5 damage out of nowhere. These kinds of plays that you don't want to be leaving yourself vulnerable to. Now, as we go into set 2, there's going to be a lot more unknowns flying around. But these reliable staples, a lot of these aren't going to move. Yeah, the aggro decks are going to get some new tools. Yeah, all the decks are going to get some new tools. But there should be a lot of transferable knowledge from set 1 into set 2 for specific lines of plays and card interactions that still should just not be taking you by surprise because you already know about them.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any decks in your area, Ben, that you would consider a staple deck? So we have like the control decks and the aggro decks. So what are you seeing for like staple mid-range decks in your area?
So I think most of our meta, there's a lot of Sabine. There's a lot of aggro flying around. I know some people think the Boba Cunning deck is considered kind of mid-rangey. I slot that a little more into the aggro category, but that's another one that has some serious cards that you cannot let you take you by surprise. The Fire Spray, the Cunning, the Bodhi. You need to be ready for these shots. Probably the two best mid-range decks are both going to be in Heroic Vigilance, and I think that's probably the Luke Command, and then some flavor of Churret. The Churret Aggression decks are probably, again, maybe a little more aggressively slanted, but these decks that have the ability to play out a unit or beef up a unit with lightsabers, I think that's kind of filling the mid-range space. It surprises me that while Boba Command, I think, is still probably one of the strongest decks in the meta, it's kind of fallen out of favor. Like, not as many players are playing that, and I don't think it's because the deck is weaker than we thought. I just think being able to know how to answer Super Laser Tech, Darth Vader, Steadfast Battalion, all of these threats are kind of knowable. They're manageable. I mean, all threats are, but because there was so much Boba Command in the early days and so much of that mid-range, everybody got those reps in, losing to the deck and then eventually figuring out how to beat it. So it's kind of fallen out of favor. And the mid-range decks, well, I think Luke Command is much weaker than Boba Command as far as like a mid-range strategy. That's the one that I see more of.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about, like you have a big event coming up, right? So say you have a 1K next weekend and you're not tied to any one deck. You just want to play what you think gives you the best chance to win that event. What do you think are some tools or some ways that you can have some meta literacy, and how do you read the meta in that area to know what decks are going to be played and what should I play to counter it? Like, how do you do that?
You want to go, Kennedy, or you want me to say?
You first. You first.
Okay. So if you're going into an area where you don't really know the store, obviously the best way to know your meta is to show up to locals and play those casual games and get to know the players and figure out who the guy is that talks about aggro all the time, who the guy is that is talking. That's the best way. But, for example, I drove an hour and change down the road to go compete at a store that I had never been to before. I have really no way of knowing exactly what's going to show up there. And that is basically what we've been talking about this whole time, is the framework that I use to analyze that. I think, what are the big threats? what are the specific cards within those threatening leaders, like what's the Sabine Cunning, what are the cards in that I need to have answers for, and that kind of circles back around to what is my deck designed to do. So the first thing I always want to do is have my plan in place. even even though I play a lot of control, I still have a way that I want to win the game. Now, there may be reactive cards in my deck, but my strategy is not necessarily just, oh, let's see what happens and then react to it. I have a plan for how I deploy those Power of the Dark Sides or those sneak attacks to make sure that I'm doing what I want to do and messing up what you want to do. And unless you have a Facebook group or a Discord or something where you can kind of pay attention to the player chatter and get to know the players in that meta, you're always going into some degree a little bit blind, and you're making a guess about what the overall composition of the field is going to be. Unfortunately, there really aren't many decks that just beat everything and just win all the time. You're always going to have a weakness. While I would generally encourage someone to play the deck they have the most reps with, the one they like the most, the one they're most familiar with, if there's two decks that you're equally familiar with, I would choose the one that you think is going to have the weakness that lines up with the fewest number of people playing that deck at the event. So if you think there's going to be a lot of aggro, maybe that's not the event to play the hard control deck at. Unless that's the only style of deck that you're really good at, in which case maybe you should play it anyway. Alright, now I'll kick it to you, man.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. So, I mean, if you have more reps with one deck than any other, this is the time to use those skills. Because at the end of sort of when these decks are settled, right, the margin of error for one mistake is huge, right? If you make a mistake with your best deck and your opponent doesn't, they're probably going to win. So you need to be playing your best deck, or the deck that you know the best, or that you can perform with the best. So I always go with the deck that I have the most reps with around this time, even if it means I might have a tougher meta. For me personally, if I lose into a tough meta, I'm not upset. If I lose into like a weak meta, but it's because I made a mistake, then I'm upset with myself, right? So I'd rather play my best game and have fun than like try to guess the meta and potentially be wrong and then play my second best deck because of it or something like that. But yeah, that would be my recommendation, is sort of play the deck that you have the most reps with, and then sort of always have a plan, like we've been talking about. When you see the leader sitting across from you, you should know you should have a plan of how you want the first 3 turns to go. One thing, I can't remember if we've talked about this before or not, but I have a friend that when he playtests, and when we're like playtesting to see if our deck would do really well in a matchup, he does this thought exercise where, like, on each turn, he thinks about what could be in my opponent's hand that would completely ruin my board. And then if he figures out a card that would destroy his board because of that, he thinks about how likely is it that that player has that in their hand. Is that a common card or is it not? And same thing when he's playtesting his own deck. If he's behind or if he's ahead, right, is there a card that if he drew that card would seal the game? And if that card isn't in his deck, why isn't it in his deck? And if it is in his deck, then good. He knows that that was a good card to include in my deck because it would have won me the game right here. So it seems silly to think about, like, every time you're drawing a card, what card could this be, even if it's not in my deck, that would have ended the game right here. But as you're doing that, it sort of helps you craft your deck into these winnable situations. What about you, Banana? How do you prepare for this upcoming hypothetical tournament?
Shotgun, 2 beers, and head down the road.
Hopefully somebody else is driving.
Yeah,
So-
somebody else is driving it. No, a lot of it comes down to, so with Discord and the internet, right, I think while there's still localized metas, it is not as severe as like pre-Discord, where like you can just show up and be completely blown out. I feel like most of the competitive players are tied in online somehow. So if you go to these events with competitive players, more than likely they're tied in to a larger community than their game store for the most part. At least I feel all the competitive players that I run into are tied in. So they're up to speed on what won, like the SEG Con in Vegas last weekend. They know what won those 3 days in those decks. And so then those discussions come up in with my local play group. It's a lot of discussions and play testing, and then just feeling confident about your deck going in. So if I was going to play in a tournament next weekend in like a 1K or something, just the reps with my group and the discussions with them about what we're expecting, what was there, what did well. But at this time of the year, I think we all kind of have like our deck at this point. Like for me, I've settled into Han Command here the last month, pretty steady. So
It's a good deck.
Playing that, and then like the one guy, he's all in on Krennic, ECL, and he plays that really well. And then there's one, he only plays Sabine, and he does really well. So I mean, we haven't landed on like a team deck really, but it's just finding decks we all enjoy, and they're all good. So getting your reps in, being prepared to play whatever comes at you. Like with Han Command, I know what my game plan is against Sabine. I know what my game plan is against Boba, and I know what my game plan is against control decks. I have a path to victory in all of those matchups, and it's just playing well. And hopefully variance is on my side, right? So
In the heart of the card, yeah.
yeah, so a lot of it comes down to playtesting, and not just the playtesting, but having good just deck building discussion with other people. Two minds are better than one.
Playtesting needs to be playtesting against good players that also are trying to prepare for a similar style event, right? Playtesting against my son is probably not going to do as well as playtesting against the players that are playing every week at our local store. So you got to get good reps in against good players. And what we do nowadays, if we're preparing for a tournament, right, a lot of games can be lost or won in those first 4 turns. I'm not saying every matchup is lost or won in the first 4 turns, but if you can get more repetitions of that early game and avoid making mistakes in that early game, it's going to prolong and increase your chances at one of these big tournaments. So if we are going to play games over lunch and practice some games, we'll try to get 6 games in by just playing till turn 5 and seeing what happened, and then resetting. I mean, it's good to practice the end of the game and see if you can snatch victory from the claws of defeat, but if you can get really good at those first 5 turns, you're going to have to do that less frequently because you'll just set yourself up to win before that.
Another thing I think that helps if you're playing, sometimes it's helpful to switch decks. If I haven't played against that deck, to play that deck so you know how it works. And some good things that you can do when you're playing a new deck for the first time against somebody is talk out your thought process and say, I'm doing this because of this, and then if you make a mistake, go back, play a little more open with your playtest group at times, and talk through your decisions together. Don't just play the game with no communication. If you see your opponent, maybe you think you misplayed one of your playtest buddies, be like, okay, why'd you do that? Let's go back, maybe reset. If you would have done this or this, then this would have happened. That's good to do, I think, for helping you learn how to see the matrix for whatever deck you're playing.
Something I want to touch on, I think I've said on this show before, and in a bunch, I'm pro net deck. I am very in support of going out and finding deck lists that other people say, hey, this works for me, and then taking that and learning from it. Now, I'm pro net deck as a learning tool. I'm not pro net deck as, hey, I'm going to grab this tournament winning list and then I'm just going to go to my tournament and everything's going to be fine. So I touched on this slightly with the sort of falling off in popularity of Boba Command. Because the deck was so hot, everybody learned the lines and learned how to play around it. And if you're taking Gee's Florida list or the KTOD yellow list or any of the marquee lists from wherever, there's going to be a significant number of players who not only know that list card for card, they've also played it, they've also watched the videos with the people who made it, and people are going to know these decks inside and out. And while you're bringing a powerful stack of cards, you're also providing you're giving your opponent the map to your weaknesses because you're playing something that's so well known how it works and what it's trying to do. So again, I'm not saying don't net deck. I'm just saying use that as a foundation, as like a step ladder to reach up and grab your own unique spin on those decks and make those changes and try to be able to do things that take your opponents by surprise. There's a limit to this. Don't just throw a wacky card. Don't throw a Lando in your deck just because nobody's seen him played. So there are bounds of reason on that. But it's you've got to use the right tool for the job. And I think pulling a list from somebody established that it's a solid list is the right set of training wheels to have when you're trying to figure your deck out. I don't think that's necessarily the right choice if you're trying to go and actually win an event.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with
Solid.
neck decking, but I agree. Don't neck deck and play a deck with 0 reps just because it did well in an event. That's setting yourself
Yeah.
up for a bad time.
I guess that was a whole lot of words to say put in the reps.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have the opposite opinion too on rogue decks right now. I love rogue decks. I'm a rogue deck player, but that's not for in the settled meta, right? If you're playing a rogue deck that you're just learning and you're hoping to sneak people by surprise, they might not know the line against you, but they're probably going to know their line better than you know your rogue deck line. So be real careful with running like a rogue or a sneaky deck right now, because you're probably not going to catch as many people by surprise as you expect, and they're probably going to be really practiced at running their lines, which will possibly run you over.
Okay. Do we have any other ideas or comments about metas before we start talking about some set 2 stuff?
I'm meted out.
Well,
All right.
I think moving into a set 2 meta, right? I like what Dan said originally, where you play what you know if you're playing in an early event and build off that, because you know that, and if you add maybe 1 or 2 tools to make it better, then you're probably going to be better off. So I basically just agree with what Dan said.
Yeah, our store does a lot of win boxes when new sets come out for games. So for Lorcana, for every set I've done this. At the end of set 1, we went into set 2. It was like the second weekend the set came out and everybody was trying all these new things, and I just ran like what I thought was the best deck from the last set. And I practiced it a ton and memorized what all the new cards did. And for set 1, 2, and 3, that deck was the win-a-box winner deck, because I knew the lines, I knew what cards I was looking for, I knew how to do mulligans, so I didn't make mistakes. And for set 4, it didn't work out, I got second place, but that's still pretty good for a win-a-box. So if there's stakes like that, it's definitely worth playing something that you're comfortable with, something that you know you're not going to be going to time because you're reading a bunch of new cards. And that way you can invest more time into learning all of the new cards, right? So you learn what all those tools your opponent could be using against you are, without having to learn about what lines do I need to play in my deck, because I know my deck so well. So I really like that method of like use something that's solid, that's staple. It's not going to be the best deck in the new format, but it might be the best deck for those first couple week tournaments.
I know back when I was playing Hearthstone really seriously, one of the times where I would collect the most stars climbing the ladder was right after the new set came out, and I would just queue up Face Hunter, just tear through all those people trying to have fun with the new cards as I like climbed up the ladder real quick.
Dirty.
Hey man, I was trying to get up into those Pro Tour point legend level back in the day. Okay, so looking towards set 2, there's been a bunch of cards that have come out, and we are not going to go through all of them. We're going to pick a few highlights and talk about some of these set 2 cards that we have coming up. I guess who wants to start with a set 2 card? Banana?
Sure. Well, I did a whole video because I couldn't wait on Cad Bane, so I won't talk about
You got to pick somebody else, I guess.
But I will talk about, how about Infest Nest? Infest Nest is pretty cool, I think. 6 cost, cunning unit, on the ground, underworld traits, 5 attack, 4 health with ambush, so it's syndicate lackeys for 1 more. But while a friendly unit, including this one, is attacking using ambush, the defender gets -3 attack power. So protects your ambush cards on the crackback. So stuff like Nick Shand, who we've seen earlier, who comes in with ambush, the like mercenary company that comes in as a 5/5 with ambush and overwhelm. Those units that you would be, anything that has ambush, if Infest Nest is out there when it's ambushing, it's protected on the crackback. So I think it's pretty cool.
Henry, what do you got for us?
I'll go on one.
Or I guess, do you have other comments about?
Oh, no, I don't have any other comments about Infest Nest. I think she's great.
Yeah, I agree.
Playing a lot of Vigilance, I like to talk about the blue bomb cards in this set. So there's 2 newish reveals that I think are super fun. One for Villainy and one for Heroism. So for Heroism, let's go with our boy Chewbacca. So he's an 8-cost unit that's a 4/10 health unit with grit, which wouldn't be great if that was an 8-cost unit and those were its only things. But, like all good late-game control units, Chewbacca comes with a when played removal attached directly to him. Chewbacca comes with a takedown built in. So a takedown, right, is a 4-cost event. So at that point, Chewbacca is a 4/10 body with grit that also lets you play takedown for 1 card. That's amazing. I would probably pay that for the Smuggle cost in red even. I'm not sure I would, do that out of aspect crazily, but I mean, that's an amazing card. He's missing Sentinel. It's the only thing he's missing to make him perfect. But I'm really excited about this card, right? It's going to feel like a turn after Luke, you play another Luke that just removes something when it's played. So you build your board while you're removing other things. And I think that will be a pretty amazing card once people figure out how to build around it.
I think it looks pretty sweet. So.
The other blue bomb card is Supreme Emperor Snoke. I've seen a lot of people talk about this card. Another 8-cost unit, but now Vigilance Villainy. A 6/6 unit with the Force, First Order, and Official trait, so all those Royal Guards look at Sentinel. And each enemy non-leader unit gets -2/-2 when this guy's in play. That's awesome, right? That turns on a ton of blues removal that is based on how many hit points are left on characters. It really tunes down swarm decks, and it can actually be used super defensively, right? If your opponent has a couple units on the board and you need to slow them down to buy yourself a few more turns, this just might do the job. So I'm excited about this card. I think it's going to be super fun. I don't know what it's going to replace in my blue villainy control deck, but eventually I'm going to try it out in there and see where it fits in.
Really, his only drawback is his stat line is kind of for that
Right.
deep in the game. But his effect kind of makes everybody else's stat line. So
Yeah,
while he
it's
might not be
the
able to like get in
equalizer,
there and he might not be able to kill a base by himself, he can certainly buy you a lot of time, assuming you can get to turn 8. Yeah, we had a little bit of overlap here, Kennedy. That was my number one card that I was going to talk about too,
Dang it.
with,
You tell
with
us all about
Supreme
it. What do
Leader.
you think?
I mean, I largely agree. I think he probably won't replace Avenger as the villainy top of curve bomb, but there's certainly a role for him to play, and he comes out a turn earlier.
I think you play them both. I don't see why it's one or the other. I think you play them both.
Yeah, I mean, right now, in most of my blue control decks, I'm running 3 Avengers and a Luke Skywalker for 9, so it's pretty easy to remove the 4th Avenger that is my Luke Skywalker and replace him with Snoke. I don't have a problem with that at all. Cost-wise, that's an upgrade.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on from Snoke, the next card that really stood out to me that I wanted to hit on is not a blue card. It is a cunning card. It is a double cunning card. 6-cost Final Showdown. Ready each unit you control. At the start of the regroup phase, you lose the game. There's so much to love about this, except for the card art. I really don't care for the card art. But the idea of an alternate loss condition is so funny to me, but it actually puts you in the position where you play this, you have lethal, and you can win the game. So I got really excited when I first saw this card. Like, wow, this is such a cool top end for like the Boba cunning decks, and like the idea of doing like a Thrawn cunning is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I ran into the other room and I went up to my 13-year-old and I went, "Wait, look at this card." He looks me in the eye and he goes, "That's a pretty cool event. It'd be a shame if I outmaneuvered it." Like, really, dude? He's just immediately like, "Well, I have the counter for that. It dies to removal, so it must be bad," you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, obviously, the time to play the showdown is after your opponent has already claimed or kind of run their resources down, and you don't have to worry about them outmaneuvering or playing a cunning and exhausting all the units you just readied. But given how it works, readies units, it seems like you would have a bunch of actions to take to sort of force your way into the end of the phase. And especially in the late game, there's a lot of times where you end up claiming while your opponent still has all their resources up. So I see this like, yeah, sometimes you're going to play it, you're going to ready all your dudes, and then your opponent's going to super laser blast. And it's like, well, I had no other options. But other times, they're going to claim you're going to play this, and it's like the new double recruiting fire spray, except even better. I don't
I
know.
like that it's a
What do you guys
properly
think?
treated gambit, because it should be a gambit, but I feel like I'll never play it when it's actually a gambit. I'll only play it when it's almost always a sure thing, right? So, with, like, forcing a loss on yourself is a big cost, right? So,
Yeah.
I like it though. I like the direction they're going with the double aspect cards.
I like it. I think it's cool, but I think it's probably more of a win-more card most of the time. In this game that's so heavily impacted by who has better board presence, if you have the better board presence to win the game, like, you probably don't need that. I want to do it in Twin Suns. Because
I got excited about the idea of playing Cunning and giving a unit +4 attack, attacking in with that unit, then Final Showdown and attacking in with it again. Now that requires 10 resources, and you have to be on double Cunning to pull it off at 10 resources. But the idea of paying 4 for a Cunning and getting an 8 attack buff out of it is just... The Timmy inside of me is just cackling with glee at the probably not competitive but very fun kitchen table applications for this card. I did have one other card I wanted to talk about, not so much because I actually think it's that cool. I mean, it's fine, but the rules implications of this card, and Banana, I know you weighed in on this on Facebook as well, Arc of Hope. So this is a 2-cost command, Heroism. It's an event. Choose a unit in your discard pile. If it was defeated this phase, put it into play as a resource. If I'm playing Han Solo and I defeat a resource, and that defeated resource is now face up in my KO pile, can I put it into play using this card, Banana?
No, you cannot. You cannot. When a card becomes a resource, it is a resource, and Han defeats a resource. Even though it is a unit, it wasn't a unit when it was defeated. It was a resource when it was defeated. And the designers already waited on this. Just read the resources section in the comprehensive rules, and it's pretty easy to tell that when something is a resource, it is a resource. It's not whatever it is on the other side. Now, there are some things that let you do things, and Smuggle coming into that is a different way to play a card that is a resource, so it's a special rule. When the unit was defeated by Han Solo, it wasn't a unit, it was a resource. So it cannot be used with Spark of Hope.
Say about that card. Looking at Facebook and all the people confidently asserting that combo would work made me want to pull my hair out. Like, no, it doesn't. And I wonder if maybe part of what's going on is this game has brought in a lot of people who aren't card game people, and haven't spent like years with our brains sort of stewing in the word, like lawyery, like nuance of card game rules, because I don't think this is confusing at all. I think this is clearly obvious, and I didn't need a ruling to know how this worked. And looking at the amount of people who just confidently asserted that it was the opposite direction, I guess what I'm getting at is I wonder if maybe the mechanics are getting a little bit ahead of the player base. What do you guys think about that? If they're introducing things that are maybe a little too complex for the sort of like neophyte level of some of our players. Lorcana did a really good job coming in and sort of like slowly getting all these people who had never touched TCGs before to understand more and more complex rule, at least for the first few sets.
I've read the Facebook posts there too. They're just as bad. I think the real answer is
well,
that, like, both Lorcana and this they're not casual, but they're very like new player friendly, which is great. So I think it's fine for new players to ask questions, and it's even fine for them to like have their opinions, right? If you have a strong opinion and you need to butt heads to figure out why your opinion was wrong, by all means go for it, right? Banana will tell you you're wrong. I'll just sit back with popcorn. But I mean, it happens there too. Like, there's questions like every day where people ask the same question 150 times. I think when Banana and I were both playing Marvel Champions, there was one character that came with like 2 copies of something instead of 1. And the question got asked for like 150 times in one day on Facebook. So we just made it like the banner at the top of the page. We were like, by the way, this question, you don't have to ask it anymore. Here's the answer. We're so sick of it.
I think it was Scarlet Witch, right? She had 2 obligations.
Witch had 2 obligations. So many people asked.
Yeah.
So I think it's fine, right? It's totally okay to ask questions. And I don't think the mechanics are ahead of the player base. I think it's good that they're putting cards in that make people ask questions, because that means we're not just getting same bodies, different stats, or same abilities on different colors. We're actually getting new mechanics, which is really important. So I'm happy with that.
To be clear, I'm pro question. It's
I thought you were.
Not knowing the right answer to the question, but confidently asserting your incorrect answer
that's just the
is correct.
now.
That's the part I don't like. Yeah, okay, fair.
I think with the way they laid out set 1 for Star Wars Unlimited is very, very good. Right? I think we all agree it's probably the best set 1 release for probably any card game. Like, the way the release went, even though there was a shortage eventually, like for the first like 4 or 5 weeks, you had no issues finding product. Balance, there's tons of good viable decks that can win events. It's like a great set one. I can't think of a better set one. They really built a solid foundation that had a lot of stuff in it. There's a lot of keywords and a lot of mechanics in set one. So now they can build on that. So I don't know that it's getting too far ahead. I just think it's the natural progression of where we have to go with the game. But I do have another card I'd like to talk about for a second, if that's cool. And that is Maul, a new 7-drop in the command villainy, right? So fighting with Vader there. 7 attack power, 6 health. He's Force and Underworld. With Ambush and Overwhelm. Okay, so he's a 7-drop, 7/6, Ambush, Overwhelm. And then he has an on-attack ability that says, you can choose another friendly Underworld unit. If you do, all combat damage that would be dealt to this unit during this attack is dealt to the chosen unit instead. So I guess tonight my theme for the cards I'm picking is ambush cards that protect themselves from the crackback. Infest does it a little bit differently where the attacker is just -3. Maul, it just takes all that damage that would be dealt to him and gives it to somebody else. That's pretty wild, and he is a cool boss monster that I'm glad is in the game. He looks terrifying.
I'm very happy with him. He looks fun.
Yeah.
Something to compete with.
Art is
Vader's.
great.
Yeah.
Might even get me to play Command as a color. Probably not, but it might. I really like that card.
I also have
Wow.
something I would like to talk about, like in general, just about set 2. And I'm here, the set's not even out yet, but very early in our discussions about set 2, I was very down on Smuggle as a keyword. And I'm here to say that I was wrong. And Smuggle is an awesome keyword. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Now, some of the costs I still think are jacked up. But some of the cards... So, in looking forward to set 2, since my set 1, like, Store Showdown season is over for me personally, I'm starting to dabble in the set 2 playtesting realm and looking at upgrading some of my set 1 decks with set 2 stuff. So, since I'm a Han guy at the moment, adding Smuggle to Han Command is ridiculous because you never run out of gas. It doesn't matter if your hand is depleted or if you force throw me, because I just have these cards I can smuggle in. And then adding tech, I've added tech to the mix, so that makes all my cards have smuggle. So now, like, I can smuggle in a 3-drop Falcon if I pull it off the top of my deck from Han, or at 9 resources. At 9 resources, you could smuggle in a U-wing reinforcement, which seems pretty wild. But just the what it opens up for Han, who plays with a small hand size. Making that not matter is pretty wild. Set 2 Han looking real good. So, thumbs up for Smuggle for me now.
That's great. Glad to hear it. You're glad the cards
Played
replace themselves.
Yeah.
I played a quarterfinal match today against a Chariot Red who, after sideboarding, went full-on hand attack, force surrenders, force throws, K2SOs for not damage, but did, like, just trying to rip my hand apart. And while I was sitting there with no cards in my hand, I thought, man, sure would be cool if some of these cards had Smuggle.
Yeah.
I agree, some of the costs are still completely unacceptable, but there are some gems in there. There's some good Smuggle cards. And certainly for something like Han, or to protect you from those sparks of rebellion and forced surrenders, the existence of tech and being able to, like, hide important cards in your route, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and like doing like the 6-drop Falcon with the 3-drop Falcon, and the 6-drop has ambush, and then you could use like you can use tech to discard 1, or not tech, Echo. You can use Echo to discard 1 Falcon to buff the other Falcon. Like, there's some cool stuff you can do there. So yeah. Now
Are
I'm
there
down
any
on
other cards you guys
capture.
wanted to talk about?
Well, I'll swoop in and change the topic again.
Okay.
Banana mentioned talking about, like, preventing damage coming back to you, and what I've found is that since units sustain damage in this game, it's really important to figure out how to get more than one swing out of your unit. If you're always trading 1-to-1, it becomes this slapping battle, but if you start always getting to slap twice and your opponent only gets to slap once, it's really strong. So Swoop Down is a tactic card in Cunning that costs 1, and I love this card. I think it's my favorite card in the new set. So it says, attack with a space unit. it gains Saboteur, and it can attack ground units for this attack. So that right there is worth 1 resource. If it attacks a ground unit, it gets +2 attack, and the defender gets -2 attack for this attack. That card is amazing for like building. We've been trying for a while to build that like fully focused like space deck. This lets you defend ground while you're focusing in space, meaning you're not going to take a ton of damage back, and it puts that like strafing gunship ability on any card in space. It's pretty amazing, and I think it's a great card. So I'm super happy to see the arena interaction, and I think it's another card that's going to let you deal more damage while taking less damage, which is super important in this game, except against event control. Then you just cry, but that's okay.
That segue was legendary level, man.
There you go. I've been writing it down for a while, and now I finally got to say it. So.
I like it. It's a good card, and I'm sorry I've been laughing, but it's because when you said about the slapping each other, I immediately thought of the VeggieTales movie where I think it's Jonah the Whale. The reason in VeggieTales that Jonah needs to go to Nineveh is because they slap each other with fish, and it's like so he says it becomes a slap battle. I thought of people slapping each other with fish.
Our group is very sarcastic when we play, and we're like, this guy slaps your guy, this guy slaps your guy, or like, this guy's taking a nap. Or my one friend, he plays Jin a lot, and every time he uses Jin's ability, he's like, Jin's going to kiss this guy in the forehead, and he's going to attack and take less damage. And he says it like every time, and it cracks me up every time. I don't know why, but it does. Just remembers one scene from a movie, and he's just like, this is what I'm going to do.
That works.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to shout out a Facebook page, kind of along the lines of being silly, goofball nonsense. I don't know if you guys have seen this Sith Academy Facebook page that popped up over the last couple days.
I have.
And it's just a dude full on committing to the bit of being like if Emperor Palpatine was trying to educate people on how to play Star Wars Unlimited on the dark side. Like, down to he like hits the like button on all of his own posts, but he goes over to the angry emoji on all of his own posts. Like, it's too funny. I love it. I love the commitment to the bit. So shout out to the Sith Academy.
We need more.
Sorry, I cut you off there though, Banana. What were you gonna say, man?
I was gonna ask what stuff in set 2 that you've seen so far has you like most excited to either build on what you already have built or to start building with. Like, what new leaders are you excited to build on, or what existing stuff do you have that you think the new cards really amplify?
I'm most excited about more double aspect cards. I've been trying to do mono this whole first set because I think it's fun, and it's okay. Like, it can compete, but it's clearly a disadvantage versus having a wider card pool. And you're still going to have a wider card pool not doing that, but just having more options and more reasons to go double in on an aspect, to me, once we get to set 2, or if we get more of those in set 3, is going to be really rewarding and fun. I want that choice to be worthwhile and not feel like I'm penalizing myself to try to do it. So just seeing that we get a couple more of those in each color is really important to me. Even if the cards sometimes are meh.
What about you?
You just want more cunning cards all the way around. I want more tools for Thrawn. The first leader that I've seen that I've been like, oh, this is wild, is that Dr. Aphra that came out, I think, today. Well, I saw it today. Yeah, it was
today.
previewed today by FFG, forcing you to discard cards from the top of your deck every turn. The first archetype in Magic that I fell in love with was playing with black cards and paying life to kill things and paying life to draw extra cards, and the idea of using your deck as a resource. Like, yeah, I'm milling these cards taking these cards off the top of my deck and putting them into the KO pile, which is, generally bad, but then that powers up this other thing that she does. That's the kind of stuff I want to see from Cunning. I want to see cards where if I don't get all my pieces, if this network of a plan doesn't work, then I'm just KOing my own stuff, and that looks kind of stupid. I love the high risk, high reward. Well, like the first yellow card we talked about today, the double Cunning. I'm drawing a blank on the name now.
Final Showdown.
Final Showdown. That is like maybe pushing it a little too far, but that's the kind of thing I like from Cunning, where you're taking a risk for this potential big payoff. And I want to see more cards that let me do that with Cunning. Like that's what I'm excited for, is to see more support for these like high risk, high reward strategies. How about you, Banana?
I'm excited for Cad Bane. Okay, I'm excited he's in the game. I've played a lot of Cad Bane. I printed out 2 Cad Bane decks and have been proxying and playing Cad Bane. Xanadu Blood, Lady Proxima. I'm a big fan of Cad Bane with Tarkentown. Easy to pull off and set up because they got to throw that damage somewhere. I think Cad Bane is where he's going to end up is kind of like a bounce deck. So like you have stuff like McClunky. You can bounce one of your dudes back to hand, deal 3 damage to something, deal damage from Cad Bane, Lady Proxima deals damage to it. There's a lot of triggers. There's just a lot of stuff happening. There's shots flying everywhere. And Cad Bane's going to wreck your face. So I'm excited for Cad Bane, and I'm excited excited to build on Han Command with the Smuggle cards. Probably looking forward to, hopefully, I can go to SEG Con in Baltimore at the end of July. That'll be on set 2. And if I had to go right now, I'd probably play Han Command with some set 2 stuff just because I've obviously played a bunch. But Cad Bane's right there. Those are probably the two decks right now for me. Cad Bane Aggression with Tarkentown and Han Command with Smuggle stuff.
All right. Well, do we have any other topics or things we want to hit on before we get out of here tonight, fellas?
I want to shout out a new Patreon we have, Auto of the Bat. Welcome.
Of course.
He officially joined us in the arena.
Sorry.
I'm a big fan of that guy.
Yeah, so shout out to Shadow of the Bat. Thank you very much. Appreciate your support. But that was all I had.
All right.
Your boxes
Well,
now. That's the last thing. If you can still at your local store.
Oh yeah, quick question.
yeah.
How many boxes you in for set 2?
Well, none of my local stores are taking pre-orders yet. So right now, a big fat 0, just waiting. So
Really?
when that link goes live, I will click a bunch of buttons. But my FFG order got canceled, and my Gamers Guild order got canceled, or didn't get confirmed, or something weird like that. So I'm gonna have to buy all local, which is fine. That's what I typically do. But currently, none of our stores know how many boxes they're getting, so they're not taking pre-orders yet, which is terrifying.
Ben?
My guy told me he'd take care of me with the same order I put in for set 1, which was a case. If I wasn't in this world of like weird pre-order nonsense, I might have gotten more than that just because the pricing, our pre-order is like $99 a box if we pre-order, and then afterwards it's MSRP. Do I want to talk about MSRP? No, I don't. I don't want to get into that topic.
No, that's another show.
Yeah, so that's how my guy does it. And I think there's lots of local stores that are totally worth supporting, even if they throw a little more markup on there than the suggested price. I'll leave it at that. So unless we get some kind of like bad allocation news, my expectation is that I'm down for a case like I was for set 1. But there's a lot of scary rumors flying around right now, so we'll see what happens.
I'm in for a case from one store and 3 boxes from another. And I was basically told by the stores that if your store got in early on set 1, they're probably not going to have any issues with their set 2 pre-orders. If they got in late to the party, they're probably going to have problems. And most stores, it seems like whatever they ordered in set 1, that's where they're going to get in set 2 because... Yeah. So.
Good thing all my stores were late. I'll be running those stable decks for a long time.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I think a lot of set 1 decks are still going to be quite strong in set 2.
Yeah.
Super Laser Blast isn't going anywhere. You know, that card's going to be a staple until set rotation happens. Like, the only thing that's going to push Super Laser Blast out of the meta is if we get a 7 cost or cheaper full-on board wipe. And I can't see that. I can't see them giving us multiple board wipes in the first couple of sets. That would be... I mean, I'd take it. I'd play them. But I don't think it's going to happen. All right. Well, I think on that note, we'll wrap things up here. So until next time, we'll see you in the arenas.